Republican primary nomination process. They just did it in North Carolina in a U.S. Senate race. Now they're doing it here. I guess part of me should be flattered that they seem threatened by me and the potential of my candidacy as the nominee. But a big part of me, the bigger part of me, says this just isn't right. I mean, to hide behind a curtain, as they've done, coming up with some kind of catchy name that disguises who's really the money behind it, and then pretending to primary voters that somehow they're a legitimate player in this party nomination process is just wrong, in my opinion. And thanks for asking the question, because I think they need to be exposed.
Let me follow up, and this might be a softball. They won't all be soft. But since Mr. Tancredo chose not to be with us today, why do you suppose that Democratic money would prefer that John Hickenlooper face Tom Tancredo than either of you or conceivably Mr. Gessler? Why don't we go here first?
Well, Eric, I think conventional wisdom, I guess time would tell after you've done an election, but I think conventional wisdom is that Tom might be primary advantaged and general election disadvantaged, if we can say it that way. And I think there's a broad perspective that might be accurate. A lot of Democrat analysts say that a Tancredo nomination could be the biggest gift that we could make to John Hickenlooper's reelection. Again, time will tell, and you wouldn't know that until votes are actually cast, but I think that's exactly where they're coming from.
Yeah, I think that the Democrats view Tom as being a one-issue guy around immigration. And, you know, the perception around Tom is that he's not just hawkish about immigration, but that he's something more than that. And that's the perception around Tom, and he just has to figure out a way to cope with that if he gets into the general election. I think the Democrats are aware of that dynamic. Clearly, there's been shifts in the demographics in our state, and Republicans have to be responsive. Republicans should, if they're smart, and this is what I believe is the smart thing for my campaign to do, is be responsive, but remain hawkish on the matter, but take a tone that is human, that is civil. And I think this is something that will relate to voters across the state. But I think the Democrats probably have it pegged about right.
I'm going to ask just one more follow-up question on this. Because of the Gazette editorial that I mentioned, talking about, look, if the three of you stay in, you're going to split the base. Tancredo is then going to walk away with the nomination. I've talked to many Republicans who are very concerned about this. Why would that not happen?
Well, I'll tell you what, I got into the race in October. Many months before my friend Bob did. I like Bob, I've known Bob for years. We had discussion about who should get in the race, who shouldn't. I committed then that I was in the race. And when I make a commitment, I follow through on it. I've learned through life, through many lessons in life, that victory often comes in the 11th hour. And you have to work hard and you have to be diligent. That's what I intend to do. I've been in this race a long time, working very hard, worked my way to the top of the ballot. And so I don't see the perspective that says Kopp or Gessler ought to get out. Actually, the two new generation Republicans have been in the race the longest, and I would stick true to that message, that I think that it is time to turn the page here in the state.
And just a quick follow-up on that. If it's not you and it's not Gessler, should it be Mr. Beauprez? Should two drop out, I guess, is what I'm asking here, so that you don't split the base vote?
The question is for me. I'll tell you what I think. I believe that Tom has a ceiling that is lower than he thinks it is. And I think any of the other three in the race can best Tom. I truly believe that. I've seen that in our own numbers. I see that Tom's floor is lower than he thinks it is. There's a way to best Tom Tancredo. I firmly believe that, and that's what I intend to do. I'm going to stick to my knitting. I'm focused on my election effort, and my other friends in the race will have to make their own decisions. But I think the public rightly resents it when we have some kind of party establishment sponsored, manipulated exodus from the race. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Mr. Beauprez?
I think this race is very winnable. We like where we're at. The similarities to 2002, when I had a very crowded primary then, there was lots of talk about somebody should go away, somebody should move to the front of the line. We wondered if it was even doable back then. Ended up winning a close primary and a hard-fought primary. We feel very much the same way right now, but the biggest similarity to 2002 is that momentum's definitely on our side. We sense it from the growing crowds. We sense it from our internal data, the phone calling we're doing. I think this thing is very winnable. I don't begrudge any of my colleagues for staying in the race. Getting out is a very difficult decision, awkward at best, difficult certainly. But we like where we're at right now, and I think victory is very doable.
I promise you we'll get to some issues, but just one more political question, and obviously it wouldn't apply this year. But in an ideal world, should Colorado have a runoff provision so that whoever wins this primary among the two of you and the two others who are not here is going to do so with well less than 50% of the vote? My recollection is Tom Tancredo got a ticket to Congress in a five-way primary with about 27% of the vote. Should there be a runoff provision between the top two finishers so that the eventual nominee has to have a majority of their party?
Well, there's advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage is that elections are very expensive, and they drag out the process and make it much more difficult, I think, in the long run to gain the support, raise the money, especially if you happen to be challenging an incumbent. The benefit is that more people get to participate, and you do have that majority vote eventually that determines your nominee. I think on balance, Eric, I think the process we have in Colorado has actually served us pretty well. I don't know that that's the biggest challenges we face. I think moving the primary up as we've done, I think that's, excuse me, I think that's the most helpful thing we've done in a long while.
I'm not in favor of a runoff. I think that it takes a lot of extra resources. I'll tell you what, being in a race with a lot of other good candidates refines each of us immeasurably. And I think that makes for a pretty competitive environment. It's going to be difficult for whoever wins this race to assemble a big enough coalition against other well-qualified candidates. Unfortunately, they're not as well qualified as one candidate, but I'm just kidding. But truly, that very competitive process, I think, is good for the candidate, and I think it's sufficient. That's why I wouldn't support going to a 50% plus kind of a situation. I think a plurality will do.
Ready to move to issues?
Let's do it.
All right.
think so.
So how did Governor Hickenlooper handle the floods? last year, and what would you have done differently? And I think, Mr. Kopp, I believe it's your turn.
You know, I found it interesting. I was reading news coverage for the first few days, and he was noticeably absent. And I asked my wife, I said, I wonder what's going on. I hope everything is okay. Really, that was my thought. He was very engaged as things went on. You know, any governor is going to make trip-ups and mistakes, and they're going to do some things well. It's a very massive situation with a lot of complexity to it, and you're going to have to gather the facts and lead as you can on the spur of the moment. I guess I would have to probably give him a B. One of the things that I found a little disappointing was that rather than step up and be the chief executive of the recovery operation, he asked another person to do that. And I think this is the time, in fact, for the governor to be the person where the buck stops, not an appointee, no matter how good they may be. I think the governor's job at that point in time was to be himself the recovery officer. That's one of the mistakes, I think, from a recovery standpoint that I think the governor made.
Showing up in the middle of an emergency is something I think any governor would do, and he certainly showed up. What I'm hearing as I travel around a good bit of the state, though, and I was just out in the northeastern part of the state this last week, you're seeing a lot of infrastructure that still hasn't been addressed. The slowness of the money to get out, I'm hearing from city councilmen, from mayors, that's been appalling. As you go up to Canyon toward Estes Park, and we were told that everything was going to be fine by, what was it, December 1 or January 1, or there was some date that he picked, and it's simply not done. I don't know if that was just a false hope or a miscalculation, but it's not done. The delay in getting the money to the communities, especially before what we knew because of the snowpack was likely to be a very heavy runoff, that's created a serious problem. The other serious problem, and up and down the Platte, you're hearing farmers and ranchers certainly talking about it. Why didn't somebody think about dredging out, cleaning out the canal, the river canal, so that we didn't have the likelihood of exactly what's going on right now? I mean, those are some things that, I don't know, the old farmer in me, I guess, realizes that you'd have to take care of ditches, and rivers and creeks are essentially just great big ditches. We do that on our ranch all the time, and somebody should have been tending the store a little bit closer.
We'll cover a hodgepodge of issues here, and I guess the advantage of only having two of you is we can cover more of them. Let me shift to immigration. Obviously, we've brought up Tom Tancredo's name. Let me ask each of you. We'll start with Bob. Where's Tom right on immigration, and where is he wrong, and where are you at? What would be your policy as governor of this state, whether it's about in-state tuition for illegal immigrants, DREAM Act, but reference off of where Tancredo hits the mark and where he misses the mark?
Well, I think virtually everybody agrees we have a right, we have an obligation to secure the border and control the border. I guess Tom's there. I think he would speak on behalf of rule of law, and so would I, so would most of us. Where I end up, Eric, is recognizing, and you don't have to travel much of the state if you're a native, if you've been around it much, some experience, you understand it. We need a migrant workforce, an immigrant workforce. If you're down in Rocky Ford, as I was the other day at a melon ranch, they said, we don't know if we can get enough legal immigrants in here with the H-2B visa program right now, because it's so mismanaged and such a disaster. That's a huge problem for them. If they're putting crop in the ground in the spring, they don't know if they can get it out in the summer and into the fall months. Dairymen have been in this problem for a long, long time. Contractors, a huge problem for them. Many of our industries in the state, and pretty soon with a growing number, healthcare is going to be another one. We're going to need to have access to high tech, including medical technology, medically trained doctors and nurses to take care of the needs in this country. So access to legal immigration is something that I think is being ignored in this whole debate. What I would like to do as the next governor is pressure the federal government. Lots of governors, I think Governor Hickenlooper included, say, well, that's a federal issue, and so we keep hands off. I think that's wrong. And immigration is one of many issues where I think governors can be much more proactive in saying, you're killing us out here in the states, the federal government, by not doing your job, number one, and number two, modernizing legal immigration so we can actually get access to a labor force that can keep many of our industries moving. It has to be legal. And I think everybody understands that. But the federal government just sits there tied in a knot, and I witnessed too much of that at a time when we were trying to figure out a solution too, and most members couldn't get together on it.
Well, your question was about where Tom is right and where he's wrong. And so I guess we get to go off of Tom's view. I'll tell you this. I think that one of the things the Republican Party needs to focus on is not forgetting that we're the party that stands for hope and pride in the United States of America as an incredible place to come. And our message ought to be, we don't care what you look like, we don't care where you're from, we care what you're about. So it starts with coming through our borders legally. As a member of the Senate, I actually authored the resolution to Congress, asking Congress to do what they said they would do, which was build a portion of fence along the southern border. It was called the Secure Fence Act. It was funded. And I'd asked Congress in my resolution, look, you've funded this, well then follow through, secure the border. Because my opinion is this, we lack integrity as a society if we say America is the greatest place to come to, and I believe it is, and it should always be that, but I believe we lack integrity as a society if we don't have integrity with our own border. Because if it continues to kind of be a free-for-all, as it is right now, we're only going to see our problems continue to mount. Now, I'm the only person in this race who's actually passed immigration reform legislation of a law and order type, cracking down on felons who are here illegally in the state. But I think our message needs to be security, yes, but also opportunity. And it's critical. It's critical because there are good people that are willing to come here and work, and we need work in a lot of different areas. But how do we do that? How do we advance that in a meaningful way if we're not willing to secure our own border, if we're not willing to do things like use E-Verify, and if we're not willing to stand up and defend, in my view, kind of well-intentioned but fairly reckless overreaches in things like the DREAM Act. I think that we should not provide more enticements for people to come through a porous border. It's only going to make the problem bigger. So opportunity, yes, but let's start with security.
Let me follow up with that one, because I think many pundits have talked about the Republican Party, at least here in Colorado, having difficulty attracting and securing the Latino vote. Would your nomination change that trend in Colorado? What do you bring to the table that would actually help that trend instead of hurt that trend? Bob, we'll start with you.
I think it's important to look at what the other party has promised and then not delivered. How's education working out for minority students in Colorado? Third grade reading proficiency just got worse, again. Unemployment among blacks and Hispanics, shamefully high, and the needle hasn't moved. What we need to be is an opportunity state for everybody. Mike mentioned being colorblind. We really should be, but they talk a good talk, but they don't walk the walk. So I think it needs to be results oriented. Opportunity in the state, the thing that has kept me here as a native and has attracted scores of people to this great state, that's declined on this governor's watch, from second highest rank among all the states to now number 22. We're in the middle of the pack. Other states around us are taking that opportunity that used to be Colorado's to own. Now, I think the vast majority of people that come here, whether they're Hispanic, whether they come from the African continent, whether they come from Central America, whether they come from Mother Russia, the Asian countries, wherever they come from, they're coming here for opportunity. And opportunity starts with the dignity of a job. We used to be a full employment state. We can be again, but not if government keeps getting in the way of people's opportunity. And as I travel around the state, everybody from teachers, truckers, certainly farmers and ranchers like us, CEOs of our biggest corporations, what's driving you crazy, what's holding you back? Government regulation, government control. We need to stop that. That's why Utah has catapulted to #1 in economic outlook and opportunity in this entire country. because they went through their entire state government, eliminated regulations that weren't pro-opportunity for everybody, and created that kind of an environment. That's where we can go and address the education problem. I'd love to have a chance to talk about third grade reading proficiency, because I feel strongly about that too.
Okay, Mike?
Here's my view. Nothing validates another human being quite the way listening does. And one of the biggest dings against the Republican Party has been that the Republican Party appears to be indifferent to the Hispanics that are in our state. We can't afford to appear that way. We need to go into the Hispanic communities and actually listen, state our case with clarity and conviction, but at the same time understand the hopes and dreams of people that are here in the Hispanic community. My constant and continual communication with anybody in the Hispanic community will be, we have to have a secure border. Our country's integrity depends upon that. But let's talk about how once we have a secure border, we can actually open up and create opportunity. You know, I met, but the issues are so much more broad than just that narrow topic. I just got off of this tour across the state, met a man, a Democrat in Montrose, a Democrat named Leo, Hispanic gentleman. And he came over and I said, why on earth are you hanging out with a bunch of Republicans, Leo? He was a great guy, and he said, my party's gone crazy. They're trying to choke the living daylights out of business in the state. They're making it harder at every level just to live life. We have a lot to offer as Republicans. We need to engage. One of the reasons that I brought on a very senior advisor in my team as a Latina was to help me understand how to engage, how to be true to my conviction that we need a secure border and a safe society, but also to engage. I'm not afraid to engage. I'm willing to, and I think it's required that we do that.
Shaun?
So should the state privatize state highways like US 36? And if not, how do you pay for the roads and bridges in the state that are deteriorating if voters don't want to approve tax increases? I'm not sure who goes first this time.
Okay, I'll be happy to. I believe there's a place for private capital to be used in partnerships with the state government. They call them public-private partnerships. And we've got some, in fact, here already in the state. I think it's one option. It's one of many options. If you choose to go that route, it should be a highly transparent process, because after all, this is public infrastructure. I believe you need to have, at policy at every level, should be able to stand up to public scrutiny. And this is one of the reasons why when I was in the Senate, I authored legislation that required CDOT. It actually required their tolling authority anytime there was a project that would come up on the market for bid to be built. It actually required the tolling authority to at least examine whether it made sense for the state to get in the action. It was just a small transparency measure, but we need to have a lot more of that. You asked about funding going forward. Well, I'll tell you, I served on the Appropriations Committee in the Senate. And the Appropriations Committee is where you see how all of the money is spent. And you learn how the Democrats who controlled the Appropriations Committee the whole time I was there, you learn how they figure out how to divert money around core infrastructure projects, transportation being one of them, into welfare programs. And I saw this happen. You need to have a governor and you need to have a legislature that are driving transportation funding as a priority in the state budget. It can be done. Money follows priorities. Money follows prioritization. It follows leadership. It doesn't just go where it wants to. It needs direction. And this is what would mark my administration in a pretty different way than John Hickenlooper's. He in fact has continued the failed legacy of the FASTER program. It jacked up vehicle registration fees to these incredible amounts. It should cost you $10 to register a vehicle, not hundreds of dollars. If the Democrats thought they needed more transportation money and were unwilling to prioritize within the budget for more transportation spending, they should have had the courage of their convictions and went to the voters with the tax question. But they didn't do it, so they jacked up vehicle registration fees. And you know what? A year after that bill passed, I asked the Transportation Commissioner, I said, you know, last year the Democrats said they're going to fix all these deficient bridges. They're going to have them fixed by June. So 10 months later, I said, Mr. Commissioner, how many of those bridges have been fixed? 0. It's not the proper way to move forward. There's a better way. I suspect I'll have a chance later to get into this, but for me, we need to reset our state's bureaucracy. And my proposal for doing that is called the Blueprint for a Leaner Government. And we go through every single function in state government. Denver Business Journal said this was the most comprehensive reform in 50 years. I asked the governor to help. Of course, I didn't get any assistance with that. I want to reprioritize the way our whole bureaucracy works, drive down the cost, size, complexity of it, so that we're spending money on core projects and core government functions as we should: public safety, education, roads and transportation. Among those should be top priorities. So we should do that before going to the voters with our hands out or our hats out asking for more money.
Mr. Beauprez.
As you might remember, Shaun, when I went to Congress, I had the opportunity to serve on the Transportation Committee and was Vice Chairman of the Highways and Bridges Subcommittee when we had a reauthorization year. So I was exposed to not only a lot of what the nation does and needs, but what's done around the world. Private funding, as is happening on US 36 right now, is one of those options that, frankly, we've been slow, we as the United States, been slow to adopt. It is a tool, and it's an option that we ought to consider. I don't fault the state nor the governor for considering that and actually utilizing it on 36. I think it's a corridor where that kind of funding made sense. What I fault them for is the lack of transparency. I mean, we all kind of found out almost accidentally. And then they said, no, we're not going to show you the contract. And they kind of tried to hide it from the public. And that, when you're obligating 2 generations of Coloradans to pay the bill, and you made a pledge as the governor to be a transparent administration, you got some explaining to do. That's the problem with the private funding. I think the best way to deal with the funding shortfall in Colorado, I'll keep going back to this, whether it's the education funding challenge, whether it's the other funding challenges that people want to talk about in the state, get this economy moving again. We're way short on the number of people that need to have a job working in Colorado. As the Denver Post chronicled, Aldo Civaldi said, real unemployment in Colorado is still about 10% when you factor in the number of people that have walked away. We're somewhere around 250,000 working Coloradans short of where we ought to be in a normal economy. Now, if we can get that many people working again, paying their taxes, have a full employment and a robust and a growing economy, not this 1-2% annual growth rate, but more like a 4.5-5%, as we historically would be this deep into a economic recovery. This has been the slowest recovery we've had since the Second World War, by the way. If we had that, then we can talk about funding for high priority items. Mike's right. A lot of it is a sense of prioritizing and leadership from the governor's office. Where does that money need to go? But if you expand the bucket, expand the general economy, now your priorities can have a big impact. And I look forward to that. Not only taking care of the infrastructure we currently have, but we need to address some new infrastructure. Southern Colorado very much could use a huge economic shot in the arm by finally addressing, which was the plan way eons ago, of an interstate standard, a divided 4-lane highway from east to west. It'd take a lot of pressure off I-70. Right now we've got to funnel almost everything up here to I-70 or down from northern Colorado to I-70 to get from east to west, west to east. It doesn't make sense anymore. And a lot of southern Colorado is saying, where's our infrastructure? Where's our economic help? I'd like to move that idea forward again. It's been around for a long, long time. Nobody's had the political will to get serious about it.
So a quick follow-up question on this, since you both talked about transparency, and I think you're probably aware the governor vetoed a bill yesterday that was supported by many Democrats who said it would have created more transparency in these contracts, would have required, in fact, the legislature to approve the contracts. What do you think of that veto?
I have to be honest with you. I spent the last 6 days on a bicycle tour across the state. I haven't had a lot of time to become acquainted with the bill. I probably agree with the Republicans who helped support that bill and move it to the governor's desk. Because my view about policy making is that when you're taking the public's money and you're requiring something of the public, that move ought to be able to always stand up to public scrutiny. Here's what I learned by being in the legislature. Backroom deals work really well for the people in the back room. Everybody else winds up on the short end. And the people I want to fight for are the everybody else out there. Transparency is critical.
I read that veto in the paper this morning, and it surprised me very much. 4 years into now, getting into his fourth year, a guy who pledged to transparency, Governor Hickenlooper, seems to have a problem with it. He's the one who, after he was sworn in, said, "No, transparency creates problems." Said that he was a fan of the old smoke-filled, closed-door decision-making. Again, when you're obligating generations of Coloradans to pick up the tab, they've got a right to know what government's doing for them and, more importantly, to them. Right. And if a deal won't stand up to sunlight, why are we doing the deal? Why are we doing the deal? So I did take note of, for a governor that seems to have a well-entrenched habit of not vetoing almost anything, he chose this one to veto. Seemed, I'll be polite and say, odd.
Let me get to a special question we have. The AARP, our sponsors, help make this whole series possible. They have a particular question that they wanted to ask. Would you support and sign legislation creating a dedicated funding stream for the Older Coloradans Act, which allows individuals to more easily age in place and supports family caregivers? Bob, we'll start with you.
Well, it sounds intriguing. Without knowing exactly all the details, it's hard to say yes or no to that. But one of the ways that we can control the broader challenge of healthcare spending is what that question implies, is to let people stay at home and get the healthcare they need at home. My parents were two of those that benefited right up until their last days by being able to do just that. So it makes sense from lots of perspectives. Very personal, having had experience with that. But I know that there's a plethora of anecdotal evidence to support that makes sense on lots of levels. Seniors are much more comfortable in their home environment, rather obviously, and it's a more cost-effective place to deliver health care to.
Mike?
If it in fact is more cost-effective, I would be entirely in favor of something like that. Anything that decentralizes power and healthcare decision-making is something that I'm going to be in favor of, especially if it will save the state money. I can't help but make that comment on the backdrop of this VA disaster that is taking place right now. You know, it just goes to show you that the more the government is involved, the worse it's going to be for people at the end of the line trying to receive health care coverage. So if this will help in that regard, if it'll drive down costs, yeah, absolutely.
Eric?
Let's shift to education. I was with a charter school leader of a large suburban charter school earlier this week, who relayed to me that out of a 38-week school year, his school is now in a testing mode about 18 out of those 38 weeks. Not each kid is in testing 18 out of 38 weeks, but each kid is in a testing mode maybe 9 out of those 38 weeks. My question is, how do you preserve metrics and be able to evaluate performance and what schools are producing and which ones aren't, and yet not have tests be so dominant and central to what our education system has become? Why don't we start with Mike?
Well, I'm, first of all, firmly committed to parent choice in education because parents should be more involved. It gets back to this issue of transparency and getting back to who really should have the greatest ownership stake in the direction that our education policy in the state is going. I believe it ought to be parents. It's about kids. It's not about systems. Here's my view about this. I've long argued for the use of a front-end test for kids. In other words, when they get into, let's say, 3rd grade, they do a front-end test on the computer. Each question gets progressively harder. It's a longitudinal model, right? So the child gets into the classroom. They take this test. Each question gets progressively easier or more difficult, depending on their level of ability. The beauty of doing a test like this, it's called a map. The beauty of doing a test like this is you see the child's learning trajectory. You see where they're going to be strong, you see where they're going to be weak, and then parents and teachers and kids in real time have this information, they understand it. That test right there and then should be able to be cataloged in the aggregate so that policymakers and district heads and legislators alike can see at the front end, at the start of the school year, where each kid individually is going to be and where they expect them in the aggregate to go, protecting privacy, of course. You do the same thing at the end of the year. I would want to do that and replace virtually, if not all, of the other tests. You're right, we're killing our kids, we're wearing out our teachers with all of this mindless testing, and a lot of it, frankly, is being driven from external pressures. This is why it's so critical to let parents in these local districts drive much more of the conversation than they're allowed to drive right now.
One thing I'd like to pass in Colorado is a teacher's Bill of Rights. Teachers, along with everybody else, ought to be able to teach. That's what they went to school for, that's what they signed up for, that's what they're trained for. They're certainly, in way too many cases, not in it for the money. We all know that. They're there because they want to teach kids. Eric, the question you asked, the way I've heard it on 2 different occasions recently, one teacher in Colorado Springs says 30 out of the 180 days that are devoted to testing. A teacher in Grand Junction said, no, it's more like 45. Either one is just insane. It's just insane, way overdone. I would like to turn the whole model on its head. I think nobody loves a child more than their mother and their dad, and parents and local districts really ought to be in control of this and driving it. Mike talks about transparency. Absolutely, we'd all say that's a key. But when we're teaching or we're testing 1 in 6 or even dramatically more than that days, when do teachers get around to teach? Within this Bill of Rights, and there's a pattern out there. Bobby Jindal, who I think the world and all of I served with, is now governor of Louisiana. They did this in his state, and with great success. Empowered the teachers. Let them control their classroom, especially the discipline in their classroom. If there's a problem child, problem parent, let them deal with that. But turn them loose to have flexibility in deciding the curriculum and how best to reach those kids. Hold performance standards. Merit-based pay should be a critical piece of that, but give them some empowerment as well, and that's something I'd very much like to get done when I'm governor. Let teachers teach. Let's pass a teacher's Bill of Rights too.
So fracking, obviously a big issue in Colorado. How do you balance mineral and property rights, public safety with an industry that generates thousands of jobs, millions of dollars? Who's first this time?
Probably me.
You.
Yeah, thank you, Shaun. It is a big issue, and I think notably, and it needs to be mentioned, that where energy is being produced in the state, or historically has been produced in the state, western Colorado, certainly northeastern Colorado now, Weld County especially, they're not the ones that are screaming to let's shut down fracking, or let's shut down oil and gas, or let's have more regulation. They want to lift it up and utilize these resources we've got, and they understand that the technology, the ability now is there to extract these resources we've been blessed with more safely, more efficiently than we've ever had in the history of man, not only in the U.S., but in the history of the world. Why wouldn't we go get it? Areas less familiar with it, Front Range, right here where we're sitting today, that are less familiar with the process, have lots of questions. I get that. But the science behind it, the evidence, is rather overwhelming. That we are doing a pretty good job, a very good job, frankly, of maintaining safety. I'm an old farm guy. You all know that. I'm still on a ranch, and where our ranch is, they've started doing some oil and gas development up there. That little county, Jackson County, is glad to see it come, and they're getting some economic benefit from it. And if anybody is concerned about the environment, the land, the critters, the air, certainly the water, it's farmers and ranchers that not only make their living off of it, but in most cases want to pass it to the next generation. So we ought to let science guide good policy. And candidly, the science on this is pretty clear. Even Ken Salazar and Lisa Jackson, when she was Barack Obama's EPA administrator, testified to Congress under oath. There is zero evidence of fracking ever contaminating a groundwater source. Now, that isn't from 1 or 2 wells drilled. That's over 1 million wells that have been drilled. Do we want to be safe? Absolutely. The good news is that people and companies have figured out how to do this safer, more efficiently, protect the environment better than we've ever been able to do. So rather than turning down the screws just because we can, I think we ought to be celebrating the fact that we do it smarter and better than we ever have been able to, and take advantage of that for all of our benefits.
Mike?
Scott?
Well, I'll tell you, at the fringe of the Democratic Party, there's this element that is just not interested in burning natural gas or going after it. That's just reality. But so the problem is, though, you've got then politics driving the decision making rather than technology. Yes, we have a 60-year track record of pulling natural gas and oil out of the ground safely. And it has the reason this is so critical is it has potential to be a game changer for our state. We know of so many more oil and gas reserves in our state than we just did a few years ago, and they're right under our feet. They're accessible if we will allow the use of fracking. Yes, there's a huge economic upside, but you know, the irony in all of this is there's also an upside for people outside that are in favor and insist on more wind and solar energy. You know, you have to have natural gas plants on your electrical grid to integrate wind and solar energy, because what happens if you don't have more natural gas, if you don't have natural gas fired plants, the wind dies down, and then you've got to ramp up natural gas. A coal plant can't do that. It can't respond quickly enough, but a natural gas plant can. So the irony there is that the very side of society, the far left side that wants to shut down oil and gas production, really relies upon natural gas production in order to fully integrate the wind resources that they would like to fully integrate. So when they say they're for responsible energy development, I don't know that they really mean it. But there's another component to this that is critical. Our country was founded on the ability to pursue happiness. And you know what that phrase meant to the founders? It meant that you can own something. Your labor can count for something. The oil and gas under our feet can be owned by you. It can be a private property right, and you can use those resources in a way to bless your family and your offspring and society. And we've got these fracking bans that will step between a private property owner and their ability to use those that way, and it benefits society by creating a lot of jobs for our state too.
Gentlemen, a little bit back to politics. The Colorado Republican Party, I would assume, is very hungry for a major win. It's been many years, and with apologies to Treasurer Stapleton and Attorney General Suthers, where a Republican has won a major statewide battle. You're poised to become one of these, can become the nominee. What makes you the right choice to win in a very particular state in Colorado? We're essentially divided into thirds with independents, Republicans, and Democrats. We have rural and metro voters. It's a difficult statewide race. What makes you the right choice for the Republicans to but to get that big win that they're hungry for? I think, Mike, we start with you.
Okay, well, look, I think it's time to turn the page. We need to try some new things here. That's my belief. That's my view. We've elected 4 U.S. senators or 4 statewide office holders in the office of U.S. Senator or Governor in the last 40 years. 2 of those are Hank Brown and Bill Armstrong. They both endorsed my candidacy, and here's why. They recognize that you have to have a true, proven, consistent conservative, but someone who can also build a broad enough coalition to advance conservative reforms. It's not enough just to have someone who can say the right red meat kinds of things, but you have to build a big enough coalition. You hit it on the head. This is a very politically complex state to lead in because you've got a third Republican, a third Democrat, a third unaffiliated. This is the environment I had to lead in as the minority leader in the state Senate, and I did that with success. The fact is, I was able as a minority member of the Senate to cut taxes, to pass an immigration reform measure, to put the state's check register online, and you do these kinds of things, and the Democrats aren't always crazy about those things. But I did those things as a member of the minority party because I stood on principle, and I learned how to work with other people and to lead an agenda that is helpful for the state. That's why I believe I'm positioned best out of this field to lead our state forward. I do believe it's time to look ahead to the future. That's why I offer myself in this race, and I'm excited about June 24th.
Bob?
Dominic, when I travel the state and we talk about the current governor, many people ask me, does he realize he's not the mayor of Denver anymore? And that's an inference to a rather obvious criticism that he doesn't seem comfortable outside the immediate metro area. I do. I think that's one of the things that I bring to this. My life experience, certainly starting in rural Colorado as a dairy farmer, and then a much more urban experience. We developed our bank, grew the bank. I represented a very urban congressional district. Now we've got a ranch back in the mountains. I'm comfortable in a sale barn in Lamar. I'm comfortable on a drill rig over in Moffett County. I'm comfortable in a boardroom in downtown Denver. And I think relating and understanding what this very diverse, this very blessed state, the different ways that people skin the cat every day to survive, and how government maybe can help that, not get in the way of that, is a big difference. I've managed complex situations. I've been able to attract good people to my team, give them a strategy and agenda to follow and hold them accountable. That's what a chief executive, a governor, needs to do. Mike mentioned some endorsements, and he's got some nice ones. So do I. The only living Republican governor in Colorado history, Bill Owens, is on my team, as are two other governors from very different states that know what it takes to be a governor, Mitt Romney as well as Rick Perry. So I'm flattered to have the support of people that have been there, done that, know what it would take. And I believe my life experience especially is what sets me apart. Being able to relate to all of Colorado and see the challenges, but especially the opportunities that lie in front of our people. I'd like to make this state great once again.
Eric?
Gentlemen, let's see if we can cover a fair amount of territory in a few minutes, and maybe with some quick hitter questions. We won't ask you for yes, no's, but maybe we can keep it to a couple sentences or 10 seconds apiece. I'll start off, and Shaun and I will go back and forth here a bit. Let's talk about the Colorado Health Exchange. If you're governor, do you maintain Colorado's exchange, or do you join the federal exchange? Mike?
I led the effort in the state Senate among the Republican caucus to not build a state exchange, and I would continue on that course. I think it's an extra unnecessary layer of government that we just don't need.
If we can't improve the exchange to where we can truly get choice available to all of our citizens, that's the problem right now. Everything's been narrowed by Obamacare into this tiny little box, kind of like the old Henry Ford idea. You can have anything you want as long as it's black. We can get anything we want as long as it fits in that narrow little definition. That's wrong. If we can't improve the competitiveness, the choice for our people within the exchange, then we ought to get rid of it.
Do you support personhood?
I've always supported every effort to preserve the life of the unborn. People argue all the time about whether you have this perfect policy. Perfect policy is pretty hard to come by. But if people want to ask me, do I support the life of the unborn starting conception, I do, and I always have.
That means different things to different people, so let me be clear. I believe, as Mike does, that life begins at conception, and I've got a 100% pro-life voting record. I'm proud of that. That also happens to be my personal belief, my religious belief. The personhood amendment, if that's your question, Shaun, I agree with Archbishop Charles Chaput, with Archbishop Sheridan, with Archbishop Tafoya, who years ago, collectively, all Catholic archbishops, all champions all Catholic bishops, all champions of life, as I am, that said this was not the way to get it done. I think it's a flawed solution. So I don't support the amendment, but I am very much 100% pro-life and believe that life begins at conception.
Gay marriage or civil unions or none of the above?
Civil unions are fine. I'm for equal rights for all people, and I think we've struck a good balance in Colorado. The law of the state of Colorado right now is that marriage is between a man and a woman, and I support that.
You know, I had an opportunity to vote on the matter of civil unions when I was in the Senate, and I voted against it, and here's why. I believe it took on a much more symbolic tone than just kind of a legal arrangement. I thought it was essentially marriage by another name. That's why I didn't support that. I do absolutely support our continued constitutional definition of marriage as being a man and a woman.
Do you support a ban on red light cameras? It's come up year after year at the state legislature.
Is that me? No, I would not have signed that bill. I would have taken leadership in a different direction. I think we've got way too many red lights. The intent of that bill was good. But what should have been done is the same thing that the governor failed to do when he signed those gun bills. He didn't listen to law enforcement. Law enforcement was very adamant, saying there are places, problem intersections, where there's problem design, whether there's a public safety issue that is overwhelming, that should allow us, with those few exceptions, emphasis few, to be able to still use technology to keep us safer. That's the problem I had with an all-out ban.
I would ban red light cameras.
Appreciate your succinctness. The secessionist movement that we saw a year ago in northern Colorado, did you support that, and where are you at on it today, Mike?
Well, I wasn't in a county where it was up for a vote. No, I didn't. I wouldn't support the idea of leaving the state of Colorado. I actually believe that the answer is really found in leadership, and the governor has tried to sort of do a little damage control and go out and talk to these folks and say, I'll listen. You know what? Listening is important, and he didn't do that, and he should have done that. But it isn't just about listening. It's about where your values are. You know, I grew up in South Dakota. I kind of one generation removed from the farm. Really, my folks were both farm kids. I get the values because they're my values. It's pretty much bread and butter, common sense, the Constitution, the Bible, the Second Amendment. I get that. It's pretty obvious by now that our governor does not get that.
I didn't support secession, but what I did hear, and this is a pretty serious indictment for failed leadership of this governor, is that a remarkable thing, I think a unique thing. I don't believe it's ever happened in Colorado history before. We actually had, 11 counties seriously considering leaving Colorado? I mean, if that isn't an indictment on failed leadership at the state capitol, I don't know what is. And I think that's the only way you can interpret that movement.
So poll after poll shows 80% of Coloradans favor the universal background checks on gun sales. Do you? Mr. Kopp?
I do not.
No,
Mr. Beauprez?
not universal. Not if that includes private sales.
Right.
That's just a gross overreach.
I think we have a couple minutes before we go to closing statements. Let me try one more substantive question here. PARA, the Public Employees Retirement Association. How do you evaluate, each of you evaluate the health of that organization? Where would it be on your priority list, and what prescriptions would you bring to it? And we'll start with Bob.
About 1 minute apiece.
Yeah, it has to be very, very seriously reformed, and I think Walker Stapleton, our treasurer right now, is taking a big leadership role in that, and I look forward to working with Walker and following his leadership on it. The reforms are arithmetic challenges. That's really all they are, and somebody's got to address it. This governor's pretended that they've already taken care of it, and somehow magically it's going to get fixed. It won't. Walker's correct. It's about $26 million underfunded. And the steps that they took only increased that because they did adjust the actuarial tables on it. So it would be a high priority in the first session when I'm governor.
My view of it is that we must ensure that we provide the benefits to the retirees that we've promised them. I view that as a moral obligation. My fear is that we're not going to be able to do that because right now I'm being told by members of the Joint Budget Committee, or a member, that it's at least 60% unfunded right now. So what's going to happen is one of two eventualities. Either taxpayers are going to be tapped to bail it out, or you're going to cut back on the benefits that are due. And I don't think either of those outcomes is the right thing. I think we need to, for all new state employees coming into the system moving forward, we need to move them into a defined contribution plan. We probably have enough time, if we can get on this right away, to right the ship if we go about it from that standpoint. But the longer we move into the future, the more problematic the issue becomes, and the more acute that it becomes. We need real reform, and unfortunately the governor has not shown that he's too interested in reforming it. The numbers are what the numbers are.
Gentlemen, we've come to the time of the debate for closing statements. We picked some numbers before everything started. Bob, give us your 1 minute closing statement.
Dominic, Eric, Shaun, thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure. People of Colorado, there's two different philosophies at work right now in our state and in our country. One political philosophy thinks you need to be controlled, that you can't be trusted, whether it's to buy the light bulb that you want for your house, whether it's the toilet you flush in your bathroom, whether it's the health care you pick, or how you educate your child. We've even got a first lady who thinks she knows best how to feed your kids school lunches. I trust people. and I always have. That's the way I was raised. You know, if we really believe that we are created in the image and likeness of our Creator, who is the definition of goodness, then we ought to believe in the goodness, the genius of people, and understand that they provide solutions to problems, which really are just challenges and opportunities, not that they create them and government needs to somehow save them from themselves. We've had quite enough of that. And that philosophy is denied opportunity, and denied opportunity is just like stealing out of your pocket. That's like taking away your freedom. I think that's wrong. It's more than wrong. I think it's immoral. This has been an opportunity state for me all my life. I want it to be an opportunity state again for you and your children and your grandchildren. I'm Bob Beauprez. I would love to have your support to be your next governor, and I pledge that if given that support, it's that trust that I talked about that I'll work every day to earn.
Mike.
Well, thank you for doing this. And Colorado voters, thank you very much for taking the opportunity to watch this debate today. You know, a little bit about myself might be in order. Some viewers may not know a little bit about me, and I'd like you to know why I'm asking you for your vote. My first great paying job, as I like to say, was jumping out of airplanes for President Ronald Reagan. I was a member of the 82nd Airborne Division. I had a great chance to serve my country. I served in the Gulf War. I became an Army Ranger. I went on and became a hotshot firefighter, and I served in ministry as a pastor for 7 years. I went from there into business for myself and now into senior management in one of the state's large electric utilities. I served as the Senate Minority Leader in the state of Colorado. I advanced conservative reforms throughout my career, even though I was a member of the minority party. I believe this. I believe the job of the next governor, the central job of the next governor, needs to be focused on empowering individuals and not the government. We've seen too much the other way around. The government is clearly running out of its banks. I want to give people more of their own power back, less power for the government. It's been my aim really in my entire adult life to try and empower people. That's the way I'll view the job of being the next governor. I hope you'll give me a chance. My name's at the top of the ballot. My name is Mike Kopp, and I'm so grateful that you've taken a few minutes to watch today. Thank you.
Well, that is all the time we have for our look at the Republican gubernatorial primary. Ballots are already in the mail, and the final day to vote is June 24th. I'd like to thank our candidates for joining us, Bob Beauprez and Mike Kopp. I'd like to thank my fellow panelists, Eric Sonderman and Shaun Boyd. If you'd like to find out more information about any of the primary election races, please visit our websites, cpt12.org or cbs4denver.com. Be sure to tune in next Friday night at 9:30 as we take a look at the candidates running in the Republican primary for the 4th Congressional District. For everyone here at Colorado Public Television, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching.